Historically, children were seen as mini adults, which is why Muhammad was able to get away with marrying Aisha at 6 years old, followed by consummating her marriage at 9. The age of Aisha's marriage is a topic that has been talked about over and over, where Muslims defend it, saying children mature faster in desert environments. Some will even say that Aisha was a scholar. But tell me, don't you think Aisha should have had the choice as to whether or not she got married? Why are decisions that are reserved for adults being forced onto children who cannot consent? What does this mean for Iraqi girls, and where did this law draw inspiration from? How about we let the Islamic sources and Muhammad speak for himself on this one? Let's get into it. What is personal status law? To summarize this, Iraq has something called a personal status law, which is a secular law that relates to marriage, divorce, children, custody, and inheritance. The law was created in 1959 to modernize and unify family law. Instead of allowing Sharia law to govern Iraq, the personal status law sought to restrict polygamy, set minimum marriage ages, and give women greater divorce rights. Compared to many other Muslim countries, Iraq's personal status law actually reduced the influence of religion in society. Over the years, this law was modified, first by Saddam Hussein in the 90s, allowing tribal customs to influence family law more heavily. Originally, he was for women's education and employment, but changed his mind after he realized he needed support from Islamists and the other tribes. In 2003, after the fall of Saddam and the US invasion, Islamists attempted to replace the law with Sharia-based rulings. The Jafri personal status law was introduced, allowing girls to marry at a younger age. Does a girl with an underdeveloped frontal lobe understand the scope of what it means to marry at 9 years old? No, she has no idea. How would a girl at 9 years old understand what it means to have sex and be intimate? She can't know because children don't consent. Children cannot consent. Children are meant to be in school, playing with their friends, not being married and having babies. What are the harms of religious law? The reality is that religious law often limits or eliminates the rights of women and young girls. By implementing laws lowering the age of marriage, more social issues are being created rather than solving them. Young girls are more vulnerable to abusive marriages because they're going to be kept inside the house, unable to work or finish their education. This means that girls forced into marriage will have no way out. Article 41 of the Iraq's Penal Code says there is no crime if the act is committed while exercising a legal right. The following are considered to be an exercise of a legal right. Number 1, punishment of a wife by her husband, the disciplining of parents and teachers of children under the authority within certain limits prescribed by law or custom. This is yet another issue that presents itself with child marriage, the absence of laws that recognize and criminalize domestic violence. In Iraq, marital rape is not explicitly recognized as a criminal offense. The Iraqi Penal Code does not provide provisions that criminalize non-consensual acts within marriage, effectively granting husbands immunity from prosecutions for such actions. This is exactly what's happening to young girls that are being married without consent. Iraq's penal code explicitly states that it is a man's right to discipline his wife, which we can find in the Quran as well in Surah Nisa 4:34. So now you're a child that has been married against your will, and you're also subject to being beaten as per the instructions of Allah. So many children are defiant and do not listen because they're still learning about how to be a person in this world. If you're a parent yourself, you would understand this. Wouldn't having a child bride mean the child is more likely to be beaten because of the fact that she's a child? Also, unlike secular law, Allah is not open-minded when it comes to realizing his faults and shortcomings in rulings like this. So there's no convincing him that beating your wife, whether adult or child, is wrong. It's up to humans, not Allah, to correct his mistakes. Before I continue, just a friendly reminder to subscribe. I'll be making more videos on the social issues in Islam and how it affects our world today. This script was brought to you by my wife. Thank you so much for your support on this. Here's another clip that I found from an organization called Musawa, which is actually an Islamic organization that focuses on justice and rights for Muslim families. Although this is a good cause, the problem is that even such organizations do not want to admit that Islam itself is the issue here. However, they did have some interesting data that corroborated with other research I did about personal status law in Iraq's penal code. Let's read what it says. While civil society has advocated for a law to address domestic violence and more than one draft law has been put forward to government, many politicians, including religious parties, are still against the adoption of this law because they believe in giving the right to husband, father, and teacher for using violence under the pretext of discipline as stipulated in Article 41 of the Penal Code 30. It says implementing laws against marital rape have been met with stiff resistance by religious clerics. Why would religious clerics resist this law unless the religion might have something to do with it? I wonder why. Let's ask Allah. I think that Allah, the All-Knowing, will have the answer to my questions. If a wife does not allow her husband to have intercourse, should he divorce her or should he marry a second wife, right? If a woman refuses her husband's request to come to bed with no Islamically sound reason, such as sickness or his being drunk, what happens is as described below. Abu Hurairah said, the Messenger of Allah said, if a man calls his wife to the bed and she refuses it and he spends the night angry with her, the angels will curse her until morning. In the phrase, a man calls his wife to bed, the word bed is obviously a metaphor for intercourse, right? And then it just goes on explaining that, this is a sinful thing for her to do, and the angels will pray against sinners, and so on and so forth. And then at the very end, it says whether the husband wants to discipline his wife or forgive her or take another wife or divorce her, this is all up to him to choose. Let the woman beware of incurring her husband's wrath, because this will lead to Allah's being angry with her. So to start, these are some of the Islamic sources that condemn not having sex with your husband. There's no choice to not have sex as a Muslim. You must submit or the angels will curse you, whatever that means, if your husband goes to bed angry and without sex. Because the all-knowing Allah is apparently so invested in whether a woman turns her husband down for sex. These types of Islamic hadith, which have been immortalized by Muhammad and Allah, means that it's difficult for change or reform to happen since Islam is resistant to change. That is why laws do not change for the better as a country becomes more religious. They always refer back to the Quran and the Hadith, which creates entitlement and gives abusers justification for harm. Where does marrying children come from? As a modern society, we recognize the harm in child marriage, which is why we no longer live as if we are in the 7th century, or use child marriage as an example of our values and morality. Now, let's hear from scholars that want to assure us that child marriage is perfectly fine. I'm sure the reasoning will be completely rational and not disturbing at all. I have a clip of a Muslim woman justifying the marriage of Aisha to Muhammad put out by Yaqeen Institute. Let's watch it.
You know how fast it took for people to start criticizing the Prophet, peace be upon him, for his marriage to Aisha radiallahu anha? Give or take 1,300 years. That's because the idea of someone getting married really young was culturally the norm, not just in the Prophet, peace be upon him's era, but across societies over time. Now, at a certain point in history, a feeling of revulsion developed around early marriages. And although things have changed today, we simply cannot use our modern lens to judge what happened in the past. To get a better understanding of the Prophet, peace be upon him's marriage to Aisha radiallahu anha, be sure to check out our paper.
She says that child marriage was common across cultures over time. Does that make it okay? Other things were common as well, such as murder. Does that make it any less bad? Just because something is common, does that make it immune to judgment and scrutiny? Yes, people did develop a revulsion towards child marriage because it's revolting. Feeling sexual attraction to children is not normal. And yes, we can and should use a modern lens to judge Muhammad's actions because that's how society progresses and moves forward. We learn from the past to make the future better, which is why children should never get married. You might think I'm being unfair about this topic if you're a Muslim. You might think there's no way modern scholars today can really promote this, right? Well, other than that Yaqeen Institute that's trying to justify the historical reasons for it, check out my video where Sheikh Hamza Yusuf actually defends child marriage and pedophilia. At least it sounds like he's defending pedophilia. It's linked below as well. When Islam is introduced into law, humanity staggers back to ancient times where the idea of childhood was not a right or a priority. Childhood was not recognized as a distinct stage of life in ancient Arabia. Children were viewed as property, potential wives. They were not raised to believe they were able to make their own choices for the future, which is why Aisha was married at 6 years old. The Prophet engaged me when I was a girl of 6 years. We went to Medina and I stayed at the home of Beni al-Harith bin Khazraj. Then I got ill and my hair fell down. Later on, my hair grew again and my mother, Roman, came to me while I was playing in a swing with some of my girlfriends. She called me and I went to her not knowing what she wanted to do to me. She caught me by the hand and made me stand at the door of the house. I was breathless then, and when my breathing became all right, she took some water and rubbed my face and head with it. Then she took me into the house. There in the house, I saw some Ansari woman who said, "Best wishes and Allah's blessing and good luck." This little girl's like, "What's going on here?" Then she entrusted me to them and they prepared me for the marriage. Unexpectedly, Allah's apostle came to me in the forenoon and my mother handed me over to him. And at that time, I was a girl of 9 years of age. And this is in Bukhari. Aisha was a daughter of Abu Bakr, who was one of Muhammad's closest friends. The marriage was arranged. It was not a decision that Aisha made herself since she was only 6 years old. You see how Aisha says that her mother called her and she did not know what she wanted her to do? In what situation can a girl or woman ever say they didn't know they were getting married unless they're forced? Do you think if Aisha could have made this choice on her own, that she would have settled on marriage at 6 years old? No. I think Aisha would have made different life choices for herself. Instead, she was prepared for domestic life, picking semen off Muhammad's clothes like the Sahih Hadith says. I often scraped semen from the garment of the Messenger of Allah with my hand. If Aisha was married when she was 6, had sex with Muhammad at 9, and was 18 when he died, that means she spent her entire childhood and teenage life catering to Muhammad's semen-stained clothes. Imagine after living a life like this, you're not allowed to get remarried at 18 when he died just because you were Muhammad's wife. He forbid all of his wives from getting married, so she had to be celibate the rest of her life. Did girls mature faster, or was it her biology? If Islam is for all of time and Prophet Muhammad was the greatest man to ever live, what does that say about his choice of partner, a 6-year-old girl? Muslims will often defend her age, saying that girls mature faster in ancient times in Arabia. Okay, so here's some basic biology and a crash course in menstruation from my wife. Getting a period is based on a few things, one of them being a certain body fat percent. My wife has thought about this hadith many times, with Aisha being sick and then fetched for marriage when she got better. Aisha's hair fell out from sickness, but we don't know what that sickness was or why. It could have been anything from some type of skin infection, or maybe it was something much worse. Some scholars say that she may have had a fever which made her hair fall out. Also, Aisha never had any babies for Muhammad. After doing some research about why a child would lose their hair from fever, I did find one interesting disorder that can cause it, which is related to illness, stress, and weight loss. It's called telogen effluvium. If she was sick, maybe this meant that her body fat percent was low from sickness or lack of nutrition. Once Aisha's hair grew back and she got healthier, her body fat percent went up, causing her to start menstruating. This is all theory, but my wife never believed in this whole girls mature faster in ancient Arabia cope. If anything, the climate would have made the onset of puberty even more difficult in girls that were of age due to the lack of nutrition and food. Imagine the amount of energy constantly needed to do physical labor, which could lead to fatigue or lack of nutrition. Body needs resources in order to start menstruating, which the harsh deserts of ancient Arabia would be lacking. If Aisha was sick and lost her hair, then got better and grew her hair and started menstruating, couldn't it be just possible that it was just her natural biology happening here? Perhaps her body now had the resources in order to menstruate, instead of giving credit to an unforgiving environment like 7th century Arabia. So, because of the particularities of Aisha, and when she in particular started menstruating and consummated at 9, now all 9-year-olds have to suffer because Aisha and Muhammad, right? Now everyone has to deal with this, even though it was just her, right? And her particular situation and how her body was dealing with it. It's sad and unfortunate. This video was brought to you by my wife. A big thanks to her for putting together all of this for us. Check out my video, Muslim Convert Claims Muhammad Was a High-Value Man, on how modern Muslims defend controversial aspects of Islam, which ties into the justification used for Aisha's marriage to Muhammad. In conclusion, if your religion says a 9-year-old is ready for marriage, maybe, just maybe, it's the religion that's a problem. So here we are, yet another country dragging itself back into the 7th century, using Islam as an excuse to strip young girls of their rights. This isn't about maturity or culture. This is about forcing children into situations they can't consent to, all because some guy in the desert married a 6-year-old 1400 years ago. At what point do we stop pretending that this is okay? At what point do we admit that Islamic law isn't just outdated, it's dangerous? Because let's be real, if your religion tells you a 9-year-old is ready for marriage and sex, maybe, just maybe, it's the religion that's the problem. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know below. Thank you to my patrons for your continued support on this channel. Please consider joining to support the work on the channel. Join now and you'll get early access to some videos and our eternal gratitude. guiding someone away from Islam is better than 10 red camels. This is your friendly ex-Muslim and wifey signing out.